Greetings, it is I, Eamon, and this is proof that even the most simple things in the old web development world with vanilla JavaScript can get a little bit hairy. I have worked on this super small project for a couple days now. Very satisfying also, I might add, even the simplest things when they do begin to work. Let me run through what we're doing here though. Over here on the left, you'll see some very basic almost completely unstyled HTML, and over here is the actual HTML file. I'm using 4 files. I'm using an HTML, a CSS, a JavaScript file, and a JSON file. This could be achieved because it's super small with just some straight HTML, but I wanted to specifically work on manipulating data from a JSON file with JavaScript and appending it into and interacting with it in my HTML document. So here's what we got. HTML, I'm using Bootstrap, so I've got the CDN for that here, just straight and simple. I've linked up my main CSS because I did want to do some class list toggling. Title, container, this is pretty basic setup. I've got a row and 2 columns. I've styled them so that when it gets medium or smaller, the top list here of those verse references goes to the top rather than the side, so it's not too squished up. Yeah. And then I've got some classes of my own as well as from Bootstrap. So the main things that I'm working with in the JavaScript, which we'll go to, are going to be this references class and this cards class. And of course, down here at the bottom, I'm linking my JavaScript file. Let me show you the main CSS. This is for that toggling of the background. That's all I've got for CSS of my own. The JSON, I will show you this. This is very simply a list of objects with a location and a verse. So scripture reference and then the scripture itself. Very basic. And in order to add anything more down here, we can just, add something more. So if I wanted to quickly put a new one here, I'll put a comma right there, and it should just boom pop up over here as a duplicate of that 2 Corinthians passage. We don't want to do that though, so let's go back to that and then open up the meat and potatoes, which is our JavaScript file. First thing we're doing is fetching the JSON data or the file from, or the data from the file rather. So we're doing that here. I've done this several times before, and I found myself through all of this Googling and figuring it out again, which I think is just the way of the developer sometimes. But I'm grabbing the data, I'm calling this function, which I'm defining right here, the main one for displaying everything, this display verses function, grabbing the data that we got from the JSON file, and then using querySelector to grab those 2 main sections, one of which was the div that's holding the cards that you see over here, these 4 cards, and then one of which is the references section, which is this little sidebar section that's holding these 4 button-looking things. Then I go through the data, and for each item in the data, which if you recall are those 4 objects in my JSON file right here, for each of those, I'm going in here and I'm doing list.html and appending all this into the actual HTML to make these card contents, these cards and the contents therein. So here's right here where we're making it a card, then we're adding a card body, and this right here is where I am putting IDs, and I do it in a few different places, unique IDs using i.location, which is like for the first one, it's that 2 Corinthians 16:9a plus verse. So I'm making it a unique thing, a unique ID. Let me show you here. And this is in the list. Boom, ID right here. So I'm making it 2 Chronicles 16:9a verse as a unique ID, and I'm doing that for each one. Same thing in the footer. I'm making it that same reference plus footer for that ID, and then a button which is not visible, but here I'll show you this memorize button. It's got a unique ID made in the same way with appending BTN at the end of it. Then over here on the references, I am doing the same thing for this sidebar. I am appending into it the button looking guys right here. It's actually just list elements, and then I'm styling it with Bootstrap to make it look like those primary color buttons. Down here is where I put the onclick functions to work, and so I make some variables, 3 of which are in use, 1 of which right here is not yet in use. And I am grabbing getElementByID, these unique IDs. This is why I needed to make the verse and footer things at the end of those ID sections so that they are actually unique, because I want to click over in the sidebar this Second Chronicles guy, and I want something to happen over here in the main section. In this case, I'm putting Alice Blue color on the background and making the text bigger, and then displaying this footer section. And then when I click away, it goes away. This is how that magic's happening. I'm grabbing the X variable here by the ID, and I'm running through this change background function, which will then grab this other ID from Y from the iLocation.verse, and I'm toggling the toggle background class, which, if you recall, is over here in my custom CSS. So I'm toggling this on and off, very straightforward, nothing much happening there, but I'm toggling that on and off. And then if z.style.display is equal to none, well, what's that? Well, I'm glad you asked. Z is this footer ID. And if you'll see up here, where is it? Here's my footer that I've made for each of these elements. And I started off with style display none. So when the page loads, there's nothing there. So if there's nothing there, boom, that shows up on click. And then otherwise it's display none. So when I click it again, it goes back to display none. So that's what I've been working on today. Started this yesterday and did all this on-click stuff mainly today. Pretty cool. I also realized that append HTML, what was it called? Insert adjacent HTML. That's a thing in addition to this innerHTML. I started to use insert adjacent instead of doing these display toggles, but what happened was I would click this and it would create additional elements there every time I clicked it. So I mean, that didn't work for obvious reasons. I just want it to be visible and then invisible. That's it. The next thing I've got to do, I want these, when I click this memorize button, I want words to be deleted one by one, or replaced maybe with like 5 X's or random letters. So it gradually takes all the strings away. So I got to turn these, I guess I got to turn this into an array of strings and then manipulate them and repopulate the HTML here. So that's coming next. But hope you enjoyed this update for today. Have a great one. Until next time, goodbye.